Ambassador Kael'vor had delivered 17 ultimatums in his career. He was good at it. It was, in many ways, a perfect job for someone of his particular temperament. Someone who appreciated the elegant efficiency of a thing done correctly, who found satisfaction in the clean resolution of problems that lesser diplomats let drag on for years. An ultimatum, properly delivered, was not a cruel thing. It was a kindness. It said, "Here's where we are. Here is what happens next. You do not have to wonder anymore." It closed the loop. It ended the uncertainty. Every species, when faced with the full and honest weight of what the Dominion could bring to bear against them, had ultimately chosen the same thing. They chose to live. They surrendered their expansion rights, accepted Dominion oversight, and went on existing in the diminished but stable way that client species existed under Dominion administration. They grieved their independence for a generation, and then they adjusted, because all things adjusted, because adjustment was what living things did. 17 species, 17 ultimatums, 17 surrenders. Kael'vor had not expected the 18th to be different. He had prepared for the meeting the way he always prepared, thoroughly, methodically, with the calm professionalism of a man who had done this enough times that it no longer produced anxiety. He had read the intelligence files on humanity, all of them, their history, their psychology, their political structures, their military capacity. He was a diplomat of the first rank, and he did not walk into rooms unprepared, regardless of how routine the assignment. The files had been interesting, in the way that all alien cultures were interesting, full of the particular texture that made each species unique, the specific flavors of their irrationality and brilliance. Humans were more contradictory than most. Their history was a dizzying alternation between remarkable creativity and spectacular self-destruction, with the gap between the two sometimes measured in years, occasionally in days. They had nearly wiped themselves out at least 4 times by his count. They had the highest rate of interspecies conflict of any civilization in the Dominion's database. They had also, somehow, produced more distinct artistic and philosophical traditions than species 3 times their age. He had noted all of it and filed it appropriately and concluded what the models concluded: a young, volatile, impressive in flashes civilization that had not yet encountered a force sufficient to teach it the value of stillness. The Dominion would teach them. That was what the Dominion did. The meeting was arranged on neutral ground, a station in the outer belt of the human system, a place humanity had proposed with a promptness that had mildly surprised him. Most species, when informed that a Dominion ambassador wished to meet, required time to process the request. They held emergency sessions of their governing bodies. They debated. They delayed, not because delay changed anything, but because it gave them the illusion of control over a situation in which they had very little. Humanity had responded to the meeting request in 6 hours. "We know why you're coming," their reply had read. "We've been expecting you. We'll be ready." Kael'vor had read that and thought, good. Efficiency. He appreciated efficiency. He had not considered what it might mean that they had been expecting him. The human delegation was 3 people. He had expected more. Most species sent large delegations to ultimatum meetings, filling the room with bodies as if numbers conferred authority. The humans sent 3, a man and a woman who introduced themselves as senior diplomatic liaisons, and an older woman who sat slightly apart from the others and did not introduce herself at all, and spent the first several minutes of the meeting looking at Kael'vor with an expression he could not immediately classify. He classified it later. It took him the whole meeting to find the right word for it. The word was assessment. He presented the ultimatum clearly, as he always did, the Dominion's position, the terms, the consequences of refusal. He had refined the delivery over 17 iterations until it was almost a kind of art, finding the precise register between authority and magnanimity that made the path forward obvious without unnecessary humiliation. He was, despite the nature of his work, a compassionate man. He wanted these conversations to go smoothly. He wanted everyone to leave with their dignity intact. He laid out the full weight of what the Dominion could deploy against a single star system that declined to cooperate. He named the relevant precedents. He made it clear, as gently as clarity permitted, that the question before humanity was not whether to accept dominion oversight, but merely when, and that the timing was the only variable left under their control. Then he stopped and folded his hands and waited for the part that always came next. The drawn faces, the exchanged glances, the quiet collective deflation of a delegation that had arrived hoping to find some angle they hadn't considered, and found none. The two liaisons did exchange a glance, but it was not the glance he expected. It was something quicker and more private, the glance of two people who had agreed on something before they arrived and were confirming that the moment had come. The older woman, the one who had spent the meeting watching him, leaned forward slightly in her chair. "Ambassador," she said, "may I ask you a question before we respond?" He nodded, because he was gracious, because he always gave them this. "How many species have you delivered this ultimatum to?" 17, he said. "And how many accepted?" "All 17. She nodded slowly, as if this confirmed something. "And in your assessment, and I'm asking for your honest professional opinion, not a diplomatic answer, do you think we're going to be the 18th? He looked at her, at the steadiness of her, at the expression on her face that he now recognized as assessment, and recognized also that it had been directed at him this entire time, and that whatever she was assessing, she was close to finished. "I think," he said carefully, "that every species I've sat across from has believed itself to be different. That belief is natural and understandable. It does not typically survive contact with the full scope of what the Dominion can bring to bear." She sat back. "The thing is, Ambassador, we did survive contact with the full scope of something once before. About 200 years ago, we built weapons that could burn entire cities in a single moment, and then we pointed them at each other, thousands of them, enough to end everything, enough to make your fleet look like a strongly worded letter, and we sat with that for decades. Knowing that the wrong phone call, the wrong reading of a radar blip, one bad decision by one tired man in a bunker somewhere, that was all it would take. We sat with that, and we didn't end. And somewhere in those decades, something happened to us." She paused. "We got comfortable with the possibility of our own extinction." The room was quiet in a way rooms were not usually quiet. Kael'vor found he was paying attention with a focus that was, in 17 ultimatums, somewhat unfamiliar to him. "I'm not telling you that to frighten you," she continued. "I'm telling you because I want you to understand our position accurately. You've presented the Dominion's terms, and we've heard them, and now I'm going to tell you humanity's position, and I'd like you to hear it with the same clarity." She folded her hands on the table, mirroring him, and met his eyes directly. "We're not going to accept." The silence after that was different, heavier. "You understand what I've described," he said. "What the Dominion will." "Yes." Flat. Certain. Not angry, not defiant, just certain. "We understand. We'd like you to understand something in return." She slid a data tablet across the table toward him. "That's a summary of our current military capacity. Not what we've shown publicly. What we actually have." He looked at the tablet. He read what was on it. He read it again. "This isn't," he stopped. "Possible." The corner of her mouth moved slightly. "We've had a lot of time to prepare, Ambassador. We saw this coming a long time ago. We have a habit of doing that, of looking at a horizon and deciding we don't like what's coming over it, and spending a generation making sure we're ready for it. You're not the first existential threat we've ever faced. You're just the first one that came from outside." He set the tablet down. He was, for the first time in 17 ultimatums, uncertain how to proceed. The data on that tablet, if accurate, and something in the deliberate, unperformed calm of the woman across from him suggested very strongly that it was accurate, changed the nature of the conversation significantly. "If you refuse," he said, and now he was the one choosing his words carefully, "the Dominion will not simply walk away. You understand that? Of course. There will be a war. Yes. Millions will die. Possibly. Ambassador." Her voice was not unkind. "We know. We have a word for it. We have a lot of words for it. We've been writing about it for thousands of years. Every civilization that exists right now exists because at some point their ancestors decided that some things were worth fighting for even when the fighting was going to be terrible." She paused. "We're not choosing this because we think it'll be easy. We're choosing it because we've looked at the alternative, at what a species becomes when it hands its future to someone else to manage. And we've decided we'd rather be the kind of people who fought. He was quiet for a long time. Outside the station's viewports, the human system went about its business. Ships moving, stations blinking with light and activity, a civilization that knew this conversation was happening and had apparently decided to spend the time it couldn't control doing the things it could. He watched a freighter drift past and thought about what it meant that they had sent 3 people to this meeting, that they had responded in 6 hours, that they had been expecting him. "You prepared for this," he said. "For this exact conversation. For the last 40 years, yes. You knew we were coming. We knew something was coming. Something always comes, Ambassador. That's one of the things our history teaches you if you read enough of it. Something always comes, and you can either be ready or you can be sorry." She picked up the data tablet and slid it back across to him. "Take that back to the Dominion. Show them what we have. Tell them what we said. And I am asking this genuinely, with no hostility intended. Think carefully about whether you want this war." He looked at the tablet. He looked at her. He looked at the 2 liaisons, who had sat through the entire meeting with the patient, quiet demeanor of people waiting for a train they knew was coming. "What is your name?" he asked. He didn't know why he asked it. He always knew the names of every delegate before he arrived. Her name had not been in the files. "It doesn't matter," she said pleasantly. "I'm not really a diplomat." "Then what are you?" She considered the question as if she found it mildly interesting. "Right now, I'm the person they sent to make sure you understood us correctly." She stood, and the 2 liaisons stood with her, and she extended her hand across the table in the human gesture of conclusion that he had read about in the files but never experienced. And he stood and took it because he was a professional and because something about this woman made him feel that not taking her hand would be a mistake of a particular kind. "Safe travels, Ambassador. We hope to hear from you soon." He left the station. He sat in his diplomatic vessel for a long time before he told his pilot to set a course for the relay point. He sat and held the data tablet and thought about 17 ultimatums and about a species that had nearly destroyed itself 4 times and was still here, and about what it did to a civilization to spend decades with the end of the world as a known and manageable quantity. He thought about the way she had looked at him from the moment he walked in. Assessing. Patient. Already decided. He thought about what she had said. "You can either be ready or you can be sorry." He thought about the Dominion, about the Council and their administrative chambers, the models and the projections and the clean, efficient machinery of expansion, and he tried to see them the way she must see them. Just another thing coming over the horizon. Just another problem humanity had decided 40 years ago that it was going to be ready for. He transmitted his report to the Dominion that night. He included the data tablet's contents in full. He wrote his assessment in the careful, precise language of a first-rank diplomat who had delivered 17 ultimatums and was now, for the first time, recommending against proceeding. He did not know if they would listen. He did know one thing, with a certainty that settled into him like cold water and stayed there. Whatever happened next, humanity had already decided how they were going to respond to it. They had decided 40 years ago. And somewhere in the outer belt of their star system, in a station chosen with a promptness that he now understood was not efficiency, but readiness, 3 people were sitting down to a meal and waiting for his answer and discussing, in whatever way humans discuss such things, exactly what came next. He hoped, with a feeling that surprised him with its sincerity, that the Dominion would be smart enough to be afraid. He suspected they would not be. He had met 17 species who believed they were different. He had just met the 18th. And for the first time in his career, he believed them.